Skin Deep, written and narrated by Saffron Bryant. Chapter 11. Ravyn narrowed her eyes against the wind. Grains of sand patted against her sunglasses and the material covering the rest of her face. Her dry hands gripped a broad shotgun that glimmered in the bright noonday sun. "I've got incoming," Grumpy called, loud enough for all the rebels to hear. 10 humans and 3 robots lined the side of the road, hidden from sight behind a thin line of trees and the sharp cliff. Thick pieces of cloth covered their faces, making them indistinguishable. Most wore guns slung over their backs and knives in their belts. Grumpy lowered his binoculars and glanced over the group. "There are at least 12 escorts, but this is what we've been waiting for." Ravyn's stomach clenched. The wagon. They'd been sitting in the desert heat for 3 days waiting for it. Now that they faced the prospect of battle, Ravyn would have gladly sat in the sand for another 3 days. The rebels shifted, lifting guns over their shoulders and aiming at the oncoming cloud of dust. Grumpy laid the binoculars in the sand, and the metal casing on his wrist slid back, revealing his broad guns. "Remember, it's what's in the wagon that's the valuable part. It'll be no good to us if some trigger-happy idiot blows it up. Don't shoot the wagon." Ravyn nodded along with the other rebels, even though she probably knew better than any of them what was at stake if their plan failed. Sweat trickled down her face, and she wiped her wet hands on her pants before readjusting her grip on the shotgun. The cloud of dust drew closer, soon joined by the loud growl of a motor and of wheels ripping across sand. Smaller shapes moved next to and in front of the main vehicle, escorts on bikes. Their helmeted heads glinted in the bright sun, making them look like insects. Grumpy crouched, ready to push off the ground. "Remember, follow my lead." The convoy roared to within 20 meters, and Grumpy stepped out of the bushes. He held out his arms and fired at the oncoming vehicles. Bright lights exploded on both his arms, and in the distance the frontmost bike exploded into bits of shrapnel. The main vehicle screeched to a halt, and people in black armor jumped off, surrounding it. The escorts on bikes skidded to the front, pulling guns over their shoulders. Ravyn's heart pounded. She took a deep breath and rolled out of the bushes, taking cover behind Grumpy's broad legs. She looked down the barrel of her shotgun and aimed at a man in thick black armor. The gun pummeled her shoulder as she squeezed the trigger. She grunted as the shotgun shells hit the armored man, and he fell back, pieces of flesh and armor flying. Smoke and spent gunpowder filled the air. The smell burnt Ravyn's sinuses, and her eyes stung as she searched for her next target. She couldn't bring herself to look at the body of the man she'd killed, letting her eyes slide past, unseeing. Around her, more gunfire exploded. The rebels had the element of surprise, but the escorts were trained killers with thick black armor and the latest high-accuracy weapons. They stood in tight formation around the wagon, firing out at the ragged rebels. The man to Ravyn's left screamed and fell. She looked over in time to see his chest turn into flying pieces of meat. He collapsed, dead, surrounded by smoking chunks of his own flesh. Bile surged up Ravyn's throat. She looked away, gasping for air. "Keep fighting!" Grumpy roared, firing another round of shots into the escorts. Ravyn blinked and focused on the van. At least 10 escorts remained protecting it, using the bodies of their fallen comrades as cover. Blood speckled the ground and created a colored arc across the dusty side of the van. The wind carried the copper tang of fresh blood mixed with sand. She lifted her shotgun. A man in black armor rested what looked like a small cannon on his shoulder. Its broad barrel gaped like a black hole as he turned to face Grumpy. A second man stood behind him, loading something into the back of the weapon. Ravyn's heart leapt and she pulled her trigger without thinking. The sudden recoil knocked her off balance and she sprawled across the dusty ground. Someone screamed. She sat up, rubbing her right shoulder with her free hand. The man with the rocket launcher lay dead, his brains spattered across the van. The rocket launcher lay abandoned in the dust by the van's front wheel. "Nice shot," Grumpy said without turning. Ravyn nodded, looking up in time to see the remaining escorts lift their guns and fire at Grumpy simultaneously. She dived to the ground behind his legs. Adrenaline surged through her veins and her mouth went dry. Bullets whizzed over her head, buzzing in the air. They smashed against Grumpy's metal casing, ricocheting off and pattering against the sand. More gunfire joined the cacophony, and screams echoed from the escorts. Ravyn dropped the shotgun and covered her head with her arms. Sand scraped her face, stinging her eyes. It felt as though the barrage of bullets would never stop. She squeezed her eyes shut. Something slammed into Ravyn's leg, and pain erupted through her calf. She screamed, turning. Blood surged out of her leg, pooling in the sand. Grumpy shoved her head back to the dirt. "Get down!" Agony raced through Ravyn's leg, and she clutched her thigh, moaning. Tears dribbled down her cheeks as she gritted her teeth. Dark clouds swirled at the edge of her vision, and a part of her wanted to leap into them to escape the pain. Through her haze of agony echoed screams. Her heart clenched. She had to keep fighting. She opened bleary eyes. 4 black shapes stood in front of the van, firing at the revolutionaries. Grumpy and the surviving rebels fought back, but the escort's superior armor helped protect them. Ravyn scrambled across the sand for her gun. Her leg burned and dribbled blood behind her, but she bit her lip and kept going. She snatched the gun and used the ground as a brace, staring down the barrel. The escort at the front wore thicker armor than the others. A red patch over his chest pronounced him head of the Queen's Guard. He fired a long sniper rifle at the rebels. A man in a ragged shirt screamed and fell out from behind cover, rolling down the hill to lie in a heap in the sand. The man with the patch swiveled and fired. Another rebel, this one a woman with blonde hair, screamed and collapsed in a shower of blood. Bullets pounded into the man's armor, creating puffs of dust, but he seemed not to notice. Ravyn took a ragged breath and aimed her shotgun at the man's helmeted head. She steadied her shaking hands, braced, fired. The shotgun slammed against her shoulder, sending another burst of pain through her body. The escort's head flew back, shattered armor and specks of blood showering the ground. His body crumpled into an armored heap beside the van. Ravyn breathed a sigh of relief and rested her forehead against the sand. Each beat of her heart carried a new wave of pain through her body. Agony coursed up her leg, burning like fire and drowning any relief she'd felt. She curled into a ball, gripping her leg as best she could to slow the blood. The sounds of gunfire crackled through the air for a few more moments, until a final scream split the desert. A rough cheer went up from the rebels, and a shadow fell over Ravyn's body. "Good shot," Grumpy said. Ravyn nodded, her eyes closed and her mouth pursed. "Looks like you could do with a medic." Ravyn nodded again, sand clinging to her face and hair. More shadows fell over her, and voices crowded around. Someone pried her hands free of her leg and put something on her wound. A chill numbness spread through her flesh, dulling the pain. She breathed more easily and let her shoulders relax. Grumpy laid a metal hand on her shoulder. "Good work, kid. This'll make the bitch scared." End chapter. Be sure to like and subscribe so you'll know when the next chapter is released.